Hi everyone, welcome to Think IAS. We are here again with the 12th class history chapter Kings, Farmers, and Towns. In the previous two videos, we have learned about what are inscriptions and how they are helping us in reconstructing the lineages for early states and kings and empires. We know about the relationship between kings and the people. We know about the new cities that formed in Mahajanpads. Now let's move ahead. So today we'll be talking about towns and trade. So, if I talk about new cities which were there in the Mahajanpads, so these emerged and they were used as the capital of Mahajanpads. Most of them were located near the routes of communication, so they were used as a major town. So, one was Patliputra, which was there on the riverine route. Second was Ujjaini, which was along the land route. Third was Puhar, which was near the coast, where sea routes begin. And then there was Mathura, which is also a major town because of the center of commercial, cultural, and political activity. Now we have to see that those who are living in these urban cities or the fortified cities. So normally kings and the ruling elites they used to live in these fortified capital cities, and we got the from these excavations we got the artifacts, whatever they were using. They include the pottery bowls, dishes. They were known as northern black polish ware, and they were normally used by the rich people. Then we also found some ornaments, tools, weapons, vessels, and they all were made up of gold, silver, copper, ivory, glass, terracotta. Then in the second century, we found votive inscriptions. Votive inscriptions means the record of gifts, whatever gifts are given to the religious institutions. And in these votive inscriptions, we find the name of donor and what is the occupation they are doing. So, with the help of this votive inscription, we found the information that who are the people who are living in these towns. So, we found that weavers, carpenters, goldsmiths, religious teachers, merchants, and guilds used to live here. Now, guilds means organization of craft producers and merchants. They usually produce the raw, then they regulate the production of that material, and then they marketed that finished product. Now let's just see what was the trade in this subcontinent and what happened during this trade. So because of the land and river routes we got, the trade was increased very highly with high intensity. These routes were used by peddlers, the people who traveled on foot. Then merchants also used them with caravans of block carts and pack animals. And sometimes favors also use these routes. Uh, so the merchants who were successful or who were rich, they were designated as Mastuvan in Tamil, Sethis and Suthavahans in Prakrit. Then the goods which were carried from one place to another with the help of these trade routes were salt, grain, cloth, metal ores, and finished products, stones, timber, and medicinal plants. Then, as India is known for spices, so pepper was the special spice which was in high demand in Roman Empire. Uh, and the textiles and medicinal plants were also transported from Arabian Sea to Mediterranean. Now, these were the routes which were used during that time to do the trade. Now we have to see how the kings and coins are connected with each other. So we found some punchmark coins made up of silver and copper during that 6th century, and they were studied by numismatist. Uh, Numismatist is a person who study about coins, inscriptions, images, and metallurgical analysis, and they found that these coins were they can help us in reconstructing the lineage. And we found that these coins were used for the trade and commercial networks, and they were issued by kings. Later on, we find that merchants, bankers, and town people they are also issuing some coins. So the first coin which was there, which was having some name and images of the ruler, it was the Indo-Greek coin. They used to rule over the northwestern part of subcontinent. Then Kushanas were also there, who used to issue coins in hordes, and they were of gold coins. And these gold coins were used for transactions because they were having some enormous values. Then we find that copper coins are also available, and they are issued by tribal republics like Yudhayas, they are of Punjab and Haryana. And then we found Gupta rulers. They used to issue spectacular gold coins, and they have the purity in them. Like they use this pure gold coins. But later on, we find that after the 6th century CE, these gold coins they taper off. The historians, they have two views. So one kind of historians, they think that because of the collapse of this Western Roman Empire, the trade has declined, and so the prosperity of states, and hence the gold coins are not used anymore. But the other group of historians, they said that because of the new towns and networks of trade has emerged, so these things have turned to some other place, and maybe because of new towns and trades, the transaction system has changed. So we are not uh, getting any conclusion regarding this, but yeah, we have two types of stories regarding this. So here we can see the Gupta coins, the Gupta Empire dynasty. They use these types of coins. These are the Panchmark coins, and these were the coins which were used by tribal people. Now we have to see, like we have learned in the first video, that inscriptions were there which were helping us uh, uh, to know about the lineages. So now we have to see how the Brahmi language was deciphered. So we found that the modern Indian languages, they are written from the Brahmi language. So they were derived from Brahmi language, and the script, it was used mostly in the Ashokan inscriptions. So the European scholars, they took the help of Indian pundits, and then they worked backward from contemporary Bengali and Devanagari manuscripts, and then they compared the letters with older specimen, and they found it was Sanskrit. But later it was clear that it is not Sanskrit but the Prakrit language. It was only that after decades that James Princip, he was able to decipher Ashokan Brahmi in 1838. Then now we have to see how Kharoshti was read, or how we use this Kharoshti language or come to know about it. So coins of Indo-Greek kings, we found them, and then we found that the names of kings were written in Greek and Kharoshti scripts. So those European scholars who know Greek language, they compared these letters, and then they found that this is nothing but the Kharoshti language. And the, With Prinsep, who identified the language of Kharoshti inscription as Prakrit, it became possible to read longer inscriptions as well. As we see that inscriptions are helping us in understanding the languages, the lineages, the relationship of people with each other. But there were some limitation within this inscriptions also. There are two type of limitations. One is the technical limitation, in which we saw that like sometimes it happens that the engraved part is very faint, so we are not able to get the exact information what is written over there. Second, sometimes it happens that whatever inscription we are getting, sometimes it get damaged, or the letters get got missed. So again, it is not giving us the actual part what is actually there. Or sometimes we are not able to extract the exact meaning of some words, what are written in the inscriptions. Or sometimes it happens that few inscriptions we have which we have already discovered, but they are not deciphered yet, or they are not published or translated yet, and hence we are not having the true picture till now, that what was the dynasties and how it actually everything was going on. There are few fundamental problems as well. Like in the inscriptions we are getting that few important messages or some laws or something very important is mentioned on the inscriptions, but we are not getting any record regarding the routine agriculture practices, or if there are any cultural things about joys and sorrows happening in daily existence. So we don't have any knowledge regarding this. Secondly, we find that whatever content is written in the inscription, it is normally because of the perspective of someone who is commissioned, who commissioned them to write. Like someone is writing the inscriptions, but it was commissioned by someone, so they have to write whatever is given to them. They have to write the content which is given to them. So it can be fake. It's not, there is no guarantee that whatever content we have found till yet, it is a true content or not. So I hope you like the chapter. The chapter has ended over here only. If you like the content, if you like the chapter, if you like the video, do like, share and subscribe Think IAS. You have any doubts, if you have any comments, you can write it down in the comment section. You want me to make some more videos regarding these chapters, or you want some more content regarding something else, you can write it down in the comment section. We'll try to make videos on that as well. Till then, see you. Bye bye, take care.